25, I was told I could die any day. Long story short of this is I end up having a stroke. But in that, I had this thing where I lost fear, Jeff. And I said, well, if I could die any day, I want to go fix the world.
Occupational therapist, mental edge coach.
Darlene Santor, also known as Coach Dar.
She helps athletes get a competitive edge mentally over their opponents.
Has worked with athletes from the NBA, NFL, MLB.
Darlene Santor has seen it all.
Everything that I did to help people with their mental faculties impaired. When I was running business, I was thinking, you don't have impaired mental faculties by an accident, but it's your mindset that's impaired.
So you've had 3 strokes. What's the best part of that reality?
If I'm being totally honest.
Welcome to another episode of Unlock Your Potential. Jeff Lerner, your host, always riveted to be having amazing conversations with amazing human beings and getting to pretend like it's work and somehow magically like money shows up. I don't really know what I do for a living. I get to do stuff like this and it's incredible. And today, speaking of incredible, we're joined by Coach Dar, as she's commonly known, Darlene Santor. She is a board certified occupational therapist. She's an entrepreneur and CEO in her own right. Founder of Performance Meets Purpose Consulting. She's an author. She's a speaker. She works with a bunch of athletes. She's worked with every 3-letter athletic organization that I could find. She was actually named Most Inspirational Person of the Year by the WNBA for her work with them. She does a lot of charity stuff. She's a super awesome person. And mostly she works a lot with business executives too, helping high performance people be their best. And also has an amazing story behind all that. And we're excited you're here. Coach Dar, how are you?
Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you here. So this is like basically my favorite subject on earth is unlock. Well, I mean, even the name of the show, Unlock Your Potential, like how to help people be their best version referential to themselves. Now, obviously you work with athletes and that's kind of a competitive construct, but really it's about helping people be the best version of themselves and unlock that high achievement. So I always liked, but I'm always interested in the work. I mean, people that come on the show typically do something really awesome in the world and we like to know how that works. But I'm always at least as interested, sometimes more, I think, in how a person becomes a person that does really cool, interesting things in the world. Right, so if we could let's start with Darlene, not with Coach Dar.
Yeah.
Tell me about Darlene and where she came from and how she, became Coach Dar.
I came from The Sopranos.
All right.
I grew up in the East Coast and my whole family are a bunch of Italians from the East Coast. And, we were the family on Sundays. We go to church, watch football. Everyone comes over. And from 12 until 10 p.m., it is family and friends and community over our house. And that is a huge part of like where I am today, because ironically, sports is a big part of my world, but I never set up like, oh, I'm going to work in sports to help people be great. What I did is as a young girl, my father had me in sports all the time. Part of it is because he had my sister and then he was going to have a boy and I came out a month early and was a girl. And he's like, what the hell? So I did all the things that he probably would have done if he had a son. So sports is a huge part of it. But this is interesting. When I was younger, we would break down film as a little kid. And he would have me, whether it was watching a game or was something I did. And he used to say, Dar, it's the practice that you do that leads to the great things that are the outcome. And you're going after perfect practice. No one's ever going to be perfect, but it's the practice that's important. And I used to think, this guy's a tyrant. I would be out there for 2 hours and finish practice and it would be 2 more hours, never knowing all of these lessons would lead to where I am today, coaching pro athletes. But I did that for years, obviously, as a kid. That's just how I grew up. And then my grandfather had a stroke and I was 16 years old. And I remember seeing an occupational therapist walk in and she was working on his cognition and his vision. And I said, what is it that you do? And it just, ironically, it's what fascinated me. It's what I went to school for. But here's the irony, Jeff, is that my grandpa has a stroke. I go to school to be an occupational therapist, specialized in neuro, work in a neuro unit. My first job out of college is neuro, stroke, brain injury on a stroke unit. I'm 25 now, working on the stroke unit. And I married my college sweetheart then, and we're about to start a family. I buy the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. I'm thinking, this is great. I'm doing great in life. This is the American dream I'm building. And I go to a chiropractor to adjust my neck because I had hurt my back. And I leave the chiropractic's office after being adjusted. And then I go to work a couple of days later, and all of a sudden the floor flips upside down, and the floor is the ceiling, the ceiling's the floor, and I cannot see at work. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? And so I make my way down the stairwell only by feeling, because I cannot see it all. And I go home thinking I have a sinus infection. I do not think I have anything severe going on. Long story short of this is I end up having a stroke. And when I went to the chiropractor, they manipulated my neck and they ripped the artery to my brain. So when you ask, how did I get here today? I just think that's an important part of the story, because at 25, I was told I could die any day because it was too late by the time they found it. And they said, the good news, bad news is you had a stroke and you have a blood clot left in your brain. And if it dislodges, you could die any day. Good news is we think scar tissue is going to develop around this, but it's going to take some time. So everything you do, you have to be careful, because if this dislodges, you'll die. So I'm 25 going, no, this is what my patients deal with. This is who I treat. This is not what I need. I'm going to go through. And it ended up affecting definitely a part of my life. Affects, I can't have kids, end up getting a divorce, go through all of that. But in that, I had this thing where I lost fear, Jeff. And I said, well, if I could die any day, I want to go fix the world. So I wanted to go fix healthcare. That was like my first stint. And I go back to school at night, and I end up becoming president of a healthcare company at 28 years old. And I was running businesses after that. And then in 2008, I started my own practice, because by this point, I had realized human potential, unlocking human potential. Everything that I did to help people with their mental faculties impaired. When I was running business, I was thinking, you don't have impaired mental faculties by an accident, but it's your mindset that's impaired. And if we could shift that, we could help unlock the business. So in 2008, when the world was crashing, I said, I'm going to go start my own practice, because everyone just needs to shift how they're thinking. And everyone thought I was crazy then. Literally, they were like, you're literally running companies. You're living the American dream, and you're going to go start a practice with no clients, no business. I said, yeah, in a recession. And that's what I did. I started literally teaching about how to unlock your potential, pretty much your mindset. And I did that through, built that over the years, which has led me to this practice now where I coach athletes and CEOs on the greats being greats, how to keep performing to continue to be great. And there's patterns to greatness. And so I just teach people how to create patterns that work for them based on their gifts and talents.
So it's interesting. 2008, I feel like the idea of like performance coaching, that it seemed to be sort of emerging around that time. I had a good friend who was a regional sales leader, pretty highly, established professional, and in his 20s. He was young, very successful, at Glasso, the vitamin water company.
Oh yeah.
And he just totally walked away from that career to become a business coach, just like a private business coach. And I was his first, I was in what do you call it? A Sunday school class with him.
Okay. Yeah.
And he told me what he was doing. And of course, everybody else in his life was telling him he was insane. Now, bear in mind, I was a professional jazz musician. So it didn't, I'm pretty open-minded, right? Yeah. And I'm like, dude, that's amazing. And I was just getting into online marketing and online business. And I had fumbled at a bunch of entrepreneurial things in my 20s. And so he basically said, well, I kind of need to practice. Like, you're getting into entrepreneurship. Like, would you be my guinea pig? And he basically coached me. Like, he built his coaching muscle, helping me build my entrepreneurship muscle. And it was absolutely transformative. Like, I could not have done what I did within a relatively short amount of time without him. And I've just been a huge fan of coaching ever since. It's weird to me, actually, in this world, there are still people that resist the idea that there's probably no greater investment you could make than paying for a good coach.
It blows my mind too, because I think professional athletes, they don't need to learn more skill per se. But why do you still need a head coach? Why do you still need coaches around you? It's because when it comes down to those pressure moments and even building and practicing that, you need someone to help you mentally get ready, because we're our own worst enemy. So if they still need coaches, why wouldn't everyone else? If you want to be great, the greats are utilizing them. Why wouldn't we in the business world be utilizing them?
So let's talk about this concept of greatness. I actually made a post yesterday. I assume you're open to a discussion around greatness.
Very passionate.
Seems like a safe bet. I made a post yesterday that said, I wasted years thinking I was focused just because I was working hard. And then one day it hit me, until I am in constant pain from saying no to good things, I'm not as focused as greatness requires.
That is so good.
And I admittedly, I was paraphrasing something someone else had just said. So it's like, we all need to be reminded of these things, but it's like, yeah, my greatness is in many ways directly proportional to how many seemingly good things I exclude from my life. And I'm curious that for me, that's like a super profound concept of, right? Like good is the enemy of great, right? It's like a Jim Collins thing, but where do you, I mean, you work with athletes and executives, but in general, do you feel like there is resistance to people letting go of good things to make room for great things?
Definitely, because it's also having the discernment of which to let go. And if I let go of this, is it really the one that I should let go to help me get to that next level? And well, it's good. It's not that it's bad. I mean, it's good, but it's like, well, it's good, but is it going to serve you for where you want to go? So you could look at it as the people around you. I mean, just even taking your circle of people around you. Yeah, some of them are good, but are they truly great where you want to go that are pushing you? And an example I just gave the other day, I'm in this space all the time. And one of my closest friends that I work out with, he's a retired hockey player. He's got way more endurance than me, but we work out a lot. And the other day he said to me, are you going to be a polar bear or grizzly bear? Meaning, are you getting up to do the workout tomorrow? And I had a tight schedule. And I'm like, well, now that he said it, I'm going to be a grizzly. I'll be there. Like, I was not going to not be there. But having him, which means I only have so much time to spend with a certain circle of people just because of time, that there's other people that are not, they're not my day to day. And someone like him is, because we push each other. He pushes me to a whole nother level. It's just his endurance. So my point is, it's not that people are bad. It's just, where are you going and what version of you you want to be requires you to have the right circumstances around you to push you, which requires you to let go of certain things so that you could go higher. The people, the places, the thoughts, by the way, the habits and routines that you have, because even some good things are still a distraction, which doesn't let you take the proper action.
Well, I might be a little extreme in this regard, but other than my wife and kids, who I've said, for me, and by the way, I'm talking about a third wife. So it's not even like I didn't apply this to the concept of a wife at one point, although maybe they applied it to me, if I'm being honest. But like, I do believe my wife, like, she's the best. And my kids, they're the best.
Yes.
But there's nothing else in my life that I would say, oh, that's the best. Everything is a settlement at some level.
Yes.
Like our life is just the combination of all the things that we've settled for, but that we've stopped striving to find better than.
Yes.
And that's okay-ish, but it can be taken. I mean, it's got an infinite, it's infinite in its expandability in that regard of, like, I can always be stretching for something just a little better. And so, let's start with relationships, if we could.
Yeah.
I actually think that's probably the biggest thing that most people settle for. And I don't just mean one, like, intimate relate, like a romantic way. I just mean all the relationships in our life, right? How do you typically, like, talk people through or walk people or coach people through, let's say, a process of almost trying to like quantify, because this sounds kind of mercenary when I say it, but it's like quantifying the value of relationships in our life relative to our goals, and then having some sort of a process that aligns with our values and the way we want to be in the world, that probably has hopefully some degree of kindness, where we don't just like nuke relationships. But how do you coach people through like a substitution, like, okay, we're going to sub this one out and pull this one in, or maybe move this one out a few rings, move this one in? Like, do you have a methodology for helping people re-engineer their relationship landscape in their life?
Well, I relate everything to sports. So I say you have a starting team, you have bench players, or you're off the team, and it's not personal, but we're trying to win a championship in life. And it's each person's different. So depending on what you want to win at it, like and when I mean win, it's not at the sacrifice of a human. It just means what you feel truly called to go do in this world, the version you want to be now in the next 20 years from now. You, Jeff, who you want to be, would say, okay, that version of you, what does it look like? Tell me exactly. What are the values that align with this? What is the character of this? What's the culture and ethos of you, the team? And then what starting players need to be around you that are going to help you with this, and you help them with that. Because oftentimes when we put ourselves around the best of the best, we're in value alignment. We align, so we're helping each other's mission collectively. And that's where the ethos, the kindness, the paying it forward comes into practice here. So this is not a narcissistic move. There is collaboration here. But you look at that and say, okay, is my starting team, this roster, are we all supporting each other to win because we all believe in where we're going on this? Great, let's keep this. And then there's some bench players, people that that you have relationship with that you don't always see all the time, but they're coming into this alignment, and you keep contact with them and you connect with them. And then other people that are completely out of alignment, it's not about being mean, but we only have limited time to spend and refuel with. So if I'm going to refuel with someone, it's definitely not someone that doesn't take their life serious, that doesn't take their health serious, that doesn't want to be excellent. I'll love you and I'll say hi to you and we'll connect, but it's not my inner circle where I'm refueling. You're not going to be on the starting team. So you kind of break this down: starting team, bench players, and then spectators.
Yeah, I love the team analogy. And it's like, you don't just like draft the first 12 people that show up for the tryout.
No.
It's okay to like cut people. Like, you're not going to build a winning team if you don't if you just take the first 12 people to show up. I'm using obviously basketball, but I mean, it's like, well, my college roommate, like, he was there first. So, and maybe he is that star player on your team, or maybe he's the guy that is like, got no arm in left field, but he's just on your team because he was there. And so,
this really applies, by the way. I mean, people should apply this to intimate relationships, like someone you're going to partner with too, because just because you met someone and they looked cute last night doesn't mean they get on the starting roster. That does not mean, that is one of the greatest alignments you're going to spend energy around all the time. It should be a starting player. You should have, and that needs to be where you're scouting for this and you're drafting for this. And as funny as this sounds, I talk about this openly with my friends, and I said, I might make this sport contract where they're like signed up for 5 years, but in seriousness, we should be looking at this of, is there value alignment on this scouting card? Like, how does this actually work for us, rather than just, oh, well, we connected and we went on a couple dates. Sure, we could hang out. Hold up. Is this person going to help you? And are you going to help them propel your future forward? Or is this going to be a handicap? Is this going to pull you back? And we really have to, there's so many relationships that are having hardships, and for good reason, because we have to pick better. We have to align better. We have to have value alignment. And often it's not treated with that seriousness.
Yeah. And I think, I'll just come from I feel like the most important quality to screen for, and I'll just so you have some context here, I have, and then I'll come back and finish that sentence. The most important quality to screen for. But this show has it has a fairly diverse audience, but it clusters on the two ends of a spectrum, right? There's people that I would say tend toward like 45 plus.
Yep.
Like I would call the back nine of life,
Yep.
meaning I want to unlock my potential because I'm becoming hyper aware of time and mortality.
Yes.
And I don't want to run out of it before I've done what I was here to do. And then there's a pretty good cluster of younger people, whether like from 16 to early 20s, who are like, I don't want to wait till I'm 45 to have a life of meaning. I want to learn more now. So that's the audience here. It's kind of a mix of those. And so I'm always speaking with those two groups in mind. So in this case, where we're talking about tuning your picker, there's a group of the audience that presumably hasn't picked, or they're not too far down the pick, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then there's some that are like, oh man, I picked and I'm living with my pick. And maybe that's amazing. Or maybe I'm feeling a lot of tension. And and in the work I do, I would say the two greatest limiters of human potential are people's mindsets about money and their spouse.
Yes, 1,000%.
And so I'm curious, how do you work with someone? Because I also believe in despite my divorces, I genuinely tried. I believe in the sanctity of marriage.
Yes.
I'm not just like, oh, cut, you're out.
No. Right.
So how do you work with someone when you start to feel like their spouse is really, really dragging them, holding them back, and not open? And by the way, I did say I would finish the sentence. The number one trait to screen for, I think, is just growth mindset, that like they're constantly working on themselves, because it's very unlikely they have it all figured out when you meet them. But as long as they're willing to stay in that work, in that process, then there's reason to be optimistic. But what do you say to someone who's like, I've got a spouse, they're not open, they're not growing with me, they don't support the things that I want to do and that I know I need to do to get where I want to go, but I also, like, they're my spouse.
Yeah. So this is where I say control the controllables, because, I'm not advocating for people to go and get divorced, but I'm saying, if you're in this and you're in a partnership here, then you're going to have to understand that this person is probably not going to support you on some of these ideas, but you have to stay connected to where you have to keep growing. And what happens is eventually they sometimes change over time, because they're like, wow, this is rubbing off on me. And I've seen couples go through that, where the person, they might go to a seminar, they might go to something, and they're like, I had an awakening and I realized like things I needed to shift. So don't underestimate the power of you keep going forward to be your best version, what that could do to someone else. And the other thing is, should it not, you have done everything to make yourself the best, to add value to that relationship. So if it doesn't make it, it will not be for the lack of not trying. And you have to stay true to wanting to continue to grow yourself, because it's hard, but this is control your controllables. You control the environment within your mind, between your two ears, on how you're going to keep getting up and going after this. And it's like going into battle. You have to keep that general, that person in battle, you have to keep them motivated to stay in battle, to stay in this, if they're going to be in it. And so how do you do that? Control the controllables, which is your mindset right there for right now. And no, they're not coming along right now, but they may someday. And if they don't, I still have to go forward.
Yeah, I love that. Control the controllables. And because it's just, I ask for very selfish reasons. Like I work with, like, this is my work, is like helping people. And here's the thing. I don't work with athletes and people that are already high performance business executives. Entre my education platform, it's like all comers. People just raising their hand. I want to change my life. And so I meet them at all different places. And it's like, how to solve these deeply embedded challenges that were installed by people that had much more influence over them than I did at, 4 years old or 7 years old or 3 months old. And here I am 40 years later trying to, retrofit their mindset. And it can be brutal. So that's why selfishly why I'm asking these questions. I think that a lot of it too, I've never really thought about this literally, I think, until this moment. Do you help people? Because one of the things I find is people get involved in transformation, right? Like they're working on themselves, call it self-help, right? They're growing. Maybe they hire you and they're growing. And then they get excited about what's becoming possible for them. And so they want to like tell their spouse or anybody in their life really, and enroll them and like, hey, this is happening for me. Maybe it could happen for you too. And invariably it ends up sounding like they're talking down to them, or they've changed and then fear ratchets up. Oh, I'm getting left behind. And like all this negative toxic stuff flares up and it doesn't work. So how do you counsel and prepare someone like this is how to talk to the other person about the work that you're doing and the journey that you're on without coming off like you drank some Kool-Aid and now you think you're better than them?
I think it all depends on the person, because some people you could go home and tell, they may listen, but they're not gonna change themselves, but they'll at least listen to you. Some they're gonna listen to you and try to sabotage you. And the reason they're gonna try to sabotage you is because they actually don't want you getting better, because it's a mirror in front of them of how they're not doing the work. So then they try to gaslight you or sabotage or any of that, and it becomes a toxic circle. So if you know that that's the person that when you give them something, they use it against you, you don't share it. And that's hard, but you're just going to have to grow on your growth circle, and you're going to have the people, a close friend, a coach, a mentor, someone that you talk to saying, hey, I want to have my call to you. I want to share about what I just went to. And you have an outlet outside of that partnership that you get to share to. And that at least gets that so that you can get the feedback that you need to keep growing, knowing that you may or may not be able to handle or share that with your spouse. And this goes back to, by the way, for those that are listening that are 16 to 20 right now, that's why picking someone to share life with is so important. Someone that is going to want to grow with you. And because we all change every decade. Every decade of our life, we have changed to some degree. We've evolved, hopefully, but there's a higher version of us. There's definitely a different version of us. So you want someone that wants to grow with you. So that's really important for people to hear listening. And by the way, those that are in, 45 and after, if for some reason you've ended up in a divorce and you're in this kind of field right now of, hey, be smarter, don't just put anyone on your starting roster. Really, really spend time with, no one has to rush into anything. Spend time with people, because after 6 months, there's this general rule, which is really ironic. It is spending enough time with someone, you start to see patterns after 6 months that can't be hidden. The honeymoon phase starts to fade a little bit, and you start to see their daily patterns, their thought patterns, whether they sabotage or not. So hold up, spend that time and start analyzing patterns, both for yourself and others, and have healthy conversation around that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And one thing I'll say, and we can sort of move on from the relationship idea or concept, but I think a lot of people end up pairing around mutual interests.
Yes.
Like, oh, we both love The Sopranos, so it was meant to be. One of the things I found is that as people grow, their interests change.
Oh, definitely.
And so if you pair around mutual interests, and you presumably want to live a life of constant growth, you end up setting yourself up to some degree for a potential failure if you don't have the tools to navigate the fact that interests change. And while they might have been the same at one point, they might no longer. And that can't have been the entire substance of the partnership.
Right. It's more of values. Like, do you value being healthy together? Do you value, maybe it's faith together? Do you value autonomy together, that you both want to, what are the things that you are valuing in, integrity, or you come up with value. Like, I've literally sat with people and said, both of you come up with your 5 core values and see if they align. Because if you have core values that start to align, you're a much better chance of going forward.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm so glad that you went to values. I was doing an event last week with our company, my wife and I lead, and I sort of, more than perhaps I ever have before, I leaned into values as the store of value for all currencies in life. Like if you think of like real currency is tethered to like gold, right? Mm-hmm. That real anything in our life is tethered to underlying value in the form of our values, right? Like that's our Fort Knox is where our values are stored, and everything, the value of it derives from that. And so my big position was in business. Like we work with entrepreneurs, right? People that are trying to take a thing to the market, that like talking about your thing, honestly, nobody cares. Like, talk about your values and use your thing as the context in which to present your values to the world. And then you'll find people that align with that. So I'm curious if you could, if you agree with what I just said, and if so, maybe you could expand on it for people. Hey there, real quick. I just wanted to let you know, I have been concentrating a lot lately on providing tons of value to my text message community. This could be random thoughts. This could be letting you be the first to know about an event I'm planning or a special I'm running or a free training I'm hosting. Anyway, just shoot me a text to get subscribed. The number is 702-996-3926. Thanks so much. Let's get back to the podcast.
I'm like nodding here, like, yes, Jeff, 1,000%. Because I mean, whether it's, you're going to bring a business partner. Do you align with the values? You're going to join a company. Do you align with the mission, vision, and values of that company? Because if you don't join that company, no matter what they pay you, because you're going to run into, I don't align with you. Well, why are you here? So everything is tethered to values. And once you know them, you then say, okay, what are my talents? What are my gifts? What are my values? Where in the world does all this alignment? Company-wise, friendship-wise, relationship-wise, hobby-wise. But you're right, everything comes to values. And even in my world, I've never sold my services, not a day in my life. And I've been doing this for years and years. But if you see me on social, you'll clearly know what I value. I am talking about standards of greatness, excellence, mindset, growth, like your faith. You're going to know what my values are right away, because that's all I talk about. And that's what I align around. And that's what I coach the best in, because I believe in it.
So do you have a process for helping people? I mean, I find, I guess, let me take a step back. I find that when you get into values conversation, people sort of default to a lot of like pre-installed cliches, right? Like they came installed from the factory with their adherence to the 10 Commandments, or their love of whatever Khalil Gibran said in The Prophet, or the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, or like they're usually installed from either a religious context or a parental context or whatever. Most people, in my experience, have not actually done the work of figuring out what are my true values and what is my true mission on this earth, and what is my calling and my purpose and my own vision, and to be the change I would want to see in the world. Goodness knows I complain about enough stuff. What am I doing about it, right? Like, most people haven't done that work. And I'm curious if you have a process for helping people, because I know we're already aligned in how much more energy and drive people will have once they figure those things out.
Last Monday, I just spoke for 6 hours doing a whole workshop with a bank. And I went through literally with each of them as a whole and then individually, because I said, I could bring you as a whole to write your mission, vision, and values, but then individually, I need you to all write this the same way. And it wasn't just by, excellence is our standard. It wasn't just like the standard, but it was, I read some other ones and I evoked emotion out of their story. So once I heard their story and I evoked emotion, I said, well, that really sounds like you value these things in your world. This is how you want to show up. This is where you feel best. Again, when you take what you feel, you could create, well, I value time. Well, autonomy is not talked a lot, but you will find there's some people that said, I need autonomy when I'm working or even in my relationship, where I love being together, but I have to do some stuff by myself. And if you cap that, you cap me. So you take them through what feels, and I call everything flow state. Where am I going to help them flow at their best? Because that's what we put people into, flow state, to perform at their highest level. So when you take them through this process and you teach it in a different way, you evoke different emotions, which gives you better results, not standard canned words.
So talk to me a little bit more about that, because we're completely aligned here. I love where you're going about digging into their personal story to pull out the things that they have deep emotional connections to that are, I think there's certain values that we agree with, and then there's other values that can drive us, like they actually become a fuel source. And the fuel source values are the ones that we have an emotional connection to an experience around. So how do you help people unpack all that in a world where Values are these like cheesy posters on the wall.
Because I get them to kind of find their place, it's called, where once I take them through like understanding their personality, hey, I want you to know you're wired like this. You are wired to be a driver, or you're wired as a visionary, you're wired as someone who helps root and structure things. I take them through the wiring of who they are, which gets them teed up as a house foundation. And then I say, okay, now that you know your foundation, this is the start of your scouting card. We know what to build on. Then I want to know, what do you think if I was to ask like 3 to 5 people about your gifts and abilities? What would that be? What would they tell me who you are? Just, hey, Coach Dar, this is who Jeff is. And that's all you give them. Just write to me what it is. We're going to find correlations. We're going to find patterns. Then we write that down on paper. Then I go through and I'll say, now I want to know, where's your biggest pain point in your life? Where is your biggest adversity? What have you struggled with? And what are you most passionate about? Because now once I get their life story and I find their pain points and I find also their passion, now I'll go, it sounds like you're someone who really is striving for people to have more compassion because of what you went through. Like compassion keeps coming out for you. Or a gentleman where he was so burned by business partners who kept betraying people that way. And so he's like, authenticity means so much to me, but because of his story, he's like, if it's not authentic, like I don't even want it around it. You could just see it's a blaring core value for him. But it wasn't a canned one. It was like that came out of his story. From his pain to his purpose came the core value.
Yeah. I think a lot, I do this thing that I drive people crazy with it. I'm always looking up the root, the origin, the etymology of words.
Yes. I
like to know what words mean. I think we live in a society now where the meaning of words changes so fast. Like we're always having to Google, like, or an Urban Dictionary. Like I said something to my son the other day. I was like, dude, your fit looks pretty on fleek. And he's like, Dad, on fleek was like 5 years ago. You can't say that anymore. I'm like, words change in 5 years. I tried to be cool and I ended up making myself sound worse. I should have just not tried in the first place. But we live in a world where words change so fast. Like, what the hell do words actually mean is really important to me. And so one of the word etymologies that totally changed my life, because it works both ways, actually, interestingly, is that the root word of care, to care about something, comes from kara, which is, I want to say Old English, maybe. It's either Old English or Old German. I can't remember. But it actually means grief and sorrow. And so the reason for me, like, it's helped me recontextualize all the pain in my life. The pain was me having visceral experiences so that I would know forever forward what I deeply care about. That grief, that sorrow stamped my imprint on a value that I now care deeply about because I suffered so much for it. Like you're talking about your guy. It was like, I got betrayed and now I care deeply on the basis of that grief. Absolutely. And then it works the other way, that what we care for, we willingly sign up to feel a lot of grief around. And so anyways, I don't mean to keep interrupting.
No, I'm agreeing. I said definitely, like, we're so in alignment on this, and it goes to a cellular level. Like we literally feel this on a cellular level and our body holds on to this. So you definitely want to use things that are going to propel you forward. So even the grief, that you'll use it for good. So you could change this coding that is going on. And we deeply feel, that's why pain becomes a propelling point if you allow it. It really does, to what you intrinsically are so passionate about. And that's where, when you help people and you start opening this up for them in their heart, and you start showing them that this is the gateway forward. This is the gateway forward, is to get this out, put it out there, and then do something about this and utilize this. People that were, I mean, one of my mentors lived through the Holocaust. She was 5 years old when she went through it. When you sat at her house and you ate everything on your plate because she knew the value of not having food. And so you just knew, and how she would, what the clothes she would wear, they were always pressed because she had dirty clothes that she couldn't even change. She was in the same clothes for so long. It's just, you saw what she valued because of the pain she went through, but how she used it for purpose later on.
I love that. And it's so liberating when your values, when you're not just what you say or even what you feel, but what you live. Like the values that you're actually in the daily practice of operationalizing, when they attach in ways that you've taken the time to understand to your story, to your personal formative narrative, then you get to live every day feeling so free in who you are, because it's not just who you're choosing to be, it's who you were fashioned to become by everything that happened to you. And that's like, it takes away all the insecurity. Like, well, am I doing it right? Of course I'm doing it right. Because for the last 44 years, I've been shaped to do it this way.
Yes.
So I get excited. I love these ideas.
So do
but I feel, okay, so on that note, I feel like this idea of sort of like transmuting our pain and our struggles and whatnot might be a good bridge into you getting to share a little bit about your book, which I see you have a copy of on the shelf behind you. And I know that it is called The Art of Bouncing Back. It seems, I'm guessing that it connects to this idea. So bouncing back, find your flow to thrive at work and in life anytime you're off your game, knowing that at any given moment, the vast majority of people probably feel off their game in some regard. Let the audience know how that can be amazing and how they can use it as a springboard.
Well, here's the thing. We're not promised an easy life. We're not promised our days are going to go perfect. They never are. We have some good days. We have some good runs. We have some good years, but inevitably we run up against some tough days, some tough months, some tough years. And we're not necessarily taught mental resiliency. And so from working in neuro, my background's in neuroscience, human potential, over the years, I've been helping people use and adjust their mindset to build grit and resiliency in order to propel forward. And so when I wrote this book, what I didn't share is that first stroke has led me to 3 strokes. And my third one was literally about 4 years ago when I was trying to write. The original book was about awakening greatness. And that book will come, but my literary agent came along and she's like, how you bounce back from this and you keep getting back up is a story in itself, but you help everyone bounce back. And by the way, my third stroke, Jeff, I was so much better in how to handle it than I was at 25 because I learned how to do the things that I do now. And so this book is built with the principles that I use with my clients, I use with professional athletes, I use with CEOs. And when you learn these skills to build this resiliency and grit and a foundation of who you are, what happens is when you hit your next challenge, tough year, tough moment, your valley is not so low now because it's like you've built muscle. So you're now bouncing back at a higher level. It's not so low. So you don't go down to the deepest valley anymore. You shoot down, but you're going to come back up faster because you have the skill set that has risen you already. So when you hit that moment, you're already higher up in life. You're higher up in mentality. So you know how to handle it. By my third stroke, because I'd gone through that adversity, I knew it was coming. I was staggering again. My speech was starting to slur. So I Ubered to the hospital and I said to the Uber driver, he's like, oh, I hope your friend's okay. I said, oh, I'll let her know. And I jokingly walked in with a note from a doctor, like, I'm having a stroke. And they're like, you're smiling. This doesn't make sense. I go, I have a nervous smile. Don't take me off that. I said, but this is my third. Like, I've gone through this rodeo. My biggest thing is I pray I don't die on this table right now. But if it happens, it happens. It's like putting yourself in the cold plunge. When you get in it enough, you realize I don't like this, but I know it's not going to hurt me, or I know what to expect, and you get stronger. It's the same with when you go through adversity. The more you go through, the tougher you get mentally. That's what the book does, is it helps you get more mentally resilient and gritty to handle every day.
So you've had 3 strokes across how many years then total?
Probably over 20 years.
Okay. So, and it's just like, so you've got like, I think of it as like living next to a volcano. You've got a dormant volcano in your brain that can erupt kind of whenever, and you don't know what's going to happen, probably going to set it off. It's happened 3 times in 20 years. Mm-hmm. I assume it could happen again.
Definitely. Yeah.
What?
It gets worse.
What's the best part of that reality?
Knowing that I have to live in surrender. two things: knowing I have to live in surrender. There's nothing I can do about this, but keep myself as healthy as possible. So if it happens, I could bounce back, hopefully. And also knowing that, just like everyone knows this, but I really want to make my run my count. It's why I'm so passionate about what I do. Like, I really have a sense of urgency. It's why I wrote the book too. And the agent and the publisher, McGraw-Hill, they were like, you've got to get this out in case you do ever lose your ability to speak, or we need to get this out there. And so I live with such a sense of urgency, which is a blessing and a challenge, because I want everything to happen so much faster, but I have to live in a surrender. So I am in this constant state of, what can I do today that's going to move the ball down the field? And then once I do it, I have to okay, now I have to wait and see what happens from the fruit, the seeds that I planted. So I live in that.
Based on the current state of medicine, is it inoperable or not, at least not advised?
Yeah. And I just, out of all these years, I happened to just get an MRI a month ago that no radiologist has ever found out why these kept happening. And I just found out I have a genetic defect in my brain that literally a structure of my brain juts out right where my vertebral artery is. So if I was to jump out of a plane, go bungee jump, do anything that jars my head, it's going to neck my artery right there and I could die. So I have a genetic defect that literally I can't fix it. And if it hits it, I'm gone.
I was born with a genetic disorder called Waardenburg syndrome. And I share that. And so, it shows, like, when I was younger, especially, I looked like kids used to say I was like, the R word. Mm-hmm. And so I say that a little bit just as like a, connection moment. But
yeah.
I've had a lot that I've had to come to grips with. And I ask myself questions like this of what I'm about to ask you.
Okay.
If you could go back and do it without it, would you?
No, because I wouldn't be here today talking to you. I wouldn't have written the book. I wouldn't know what it's like to struggle at the level that I've struggled. I wouldn't know how to overcome. I would not literally be the person I am today without the adversity. And so it's been a gift. Like everything, it's a gift and a challenge, but I'm going to utilize it as the gift because it's what's allowed me to have this platform to speak.
If they could change.
We connect through vulnerability. We really do. We connect through our comment. If I came on and just told you all my accolades and that I've never went through any problems, you'd be like, well, this person's not in real life. They don't really have any challenges and I have challenges. It would be hard to relate and have me as your coach.
Would you change it now if you could, or do you like how it forces you to be?
I think there's a part that, if I'm being totally honest, like I worry that if the next stroke comes, because each one's gotten worse. And I just think, I just don't want to be the person that has the stroke where I'm incapacitated. I can't talk. I'm drooling, I'm paralyzed. I'm bed bound. I don't want that for my life. And so I hope that's not where, I took care of patients like that. So I don't want to, I just pray that that's not the next part of my story so I don't want that. But again, if I'm living in surrender, whatever is going to be is going to teach a lesson. There's a lesson that comes from everything. So I have to learn to say, if something happens, there's a lesson that's going to be taught from that. That won't be for me, because we didn't come here for ourselves, by the way. Like, we legitimately weren't born to just serve ourselves. We were born to use a gift to share with the world. That's how we advance humanity forward. We didn't come selfishly just to collect. We came to serve.
I say that so much. Our sort of philosophical foundation in the work that my wife and I do, and with our platform mantra, is based around these concepts called the 4 Ps. And the 3 Ps are physical, personal, and professional development. And you do those for the sake of the 4th P, which is your purpose. And that it's, and the way we teach it, I always use the Mark Twain quote that the 2 most important days in a man's life are the day they're born and the day they discover why. That, like, you don't get to choose when the second day is going to come, and you don't get to choose what it is you're going to discover on that second day. Like, we don't get to decide our purpose.
Yeah.
It was, I believe it existed before we did.
Yes, definitely.
And so I'm curious, And again, I'm asking so much. This is like, I don't know if they told you, but I was just asking you to come on to give me an hour of free coaching. So I hope that's okay. But like, do you run into resistance when you attempt to enroll people into the idea that there is more that they're not here to just serve themselves? Or in fact, I would go so far as say, we're only here to serve ourselves so that we can build the platform from which we can serve others.
Right. Yeah, we're putting the oxygen mask on. We're doing what we need to be our best self to then use the gift to serve others. And yes, ultimately, they don't end up becoming my clients because they know I'm going to push them to that. So if you don't want it, you're not coming to seek it. But the greats that want to be better, they want this. And they ultimately, and again, I never force anything on anyone. Just by truly living out what I believe is my core values, it attracts the people that want to be around that, which then makes, I've never had to work because I love what I do. And we get to just align and create great things together or work through challenges, but through an aligned mission. So it attracts the people that are supposed to be there. And for those that don't want it now, they will at some point. They'll find the right person that they'll align with and they'll want to move forward at some point.
So it's interesting. I've been around a fair number of very elite people in different areas of life. And so I have my informed point of view on this, but I want to hear yours. Yeah. I think there can be a tendency to think that the people that are the greats at things, particularly athletes, I would say, that they are very self-absorbed or very much in it for themselves and their own personal glory. I'm curious, is that your experience, or do you get a sense that the greatest at things are people that are striving for some sort of a higher calling and they just see the work as part of that?
I think when you're young, starting off in pro sports, you have this, I want to win the Stanley Cup. I want to win the World Series. Like, you go in with this, and they all want to win. They want to win, but they come in and it's such a brotherhood or sisterhood. And you have this bond. Now that bond becomes part of the journey. And then as you grow and you start to get a bigger platform and people start to know you, you start to realize, wow, this could be used right now for something good, or it could really hurt a lot of people based on how I show up. And I think those that have the right people around them to keep rooted, they make the journey count. And those that don't, they end up not staying in the league as long because you can't stay in it so self-centered. You just won't have longevity. And that's for anyone in life. If you stay in something self-centered, you don't have as long longevity or sustainability. But if you go into it we-centered, you'll sustain. And I look at Kobe Bryant's life. He came in this is what I want. This is how we're going to do it. And then as the years went on, he made the arc move where the arc of the story started to go, how can I help others come up? And once he did that, that is where legacy started to really happen for him.
Yeah. And I think that we all have a platform. You don't have to be a professional athlete to have a platform from which to do this, that kind of work. Okay. So listen, I know we're out of time. I want to adjourn you as promised. How can the rest of the world, or the audience at least, go find you and get some more of this goodness or this greatness, as the case may be?
I would say one of the places I'm most interactive is Instagram. It's at the Coach Dar, THE Coach Dar. And then my website is coachdar.com. Stay connected, sign up. I have a newsletter with mental skills coaching every Thursday. I have awesome 2-day exclusive retreats that I'm going to be doing 4 times a year. First one's going to be in May, so stay tuned for that. And then, like I said, on social, I'm giving tips out. I'm paying it forward all the time, weekly, if not daily, to help people mentally sustain through this. So connect with me.
Awesome. Well, Coach Dar, I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. Thanks for being a guest on Unlock Your Potential.
Thanks so much for having me.
And to all the viewers and listeners out there, you are the best part of this show, why we do it every day. We're so glad we got this time with you. We'll see you next time. Take care.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
Manifestation is great, but you can't manifest $1 billion. You've got to understand the steps to take there. Let's talk about what you really need to do to be able to focus. Well, number one,